Hello, my name's Robert Dean Steele, and this is your daily Bible class. We're looking at Revelation chapter 12. Now listen to what it says here in verse number 1. A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and the crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and gave out a cry of pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. So, the scene in Revelation chapter 12 opens with this. A great sign appears in heaven, and you see a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and the crown of the 12 stars on her head. Now, most scholars believe that this is Israel. And of course, the sun has to do with the fact that the nation of Israel has risen to prominence. The moon under her feet, of course, is the sign of, it could be Abraham and Isaac. It could be also as well that the nation of Israel was a showcase nation. It was kind of shining God's light in its particular generation and even today. And then the moon, of course, is the reflection of the glory of God. You see, the moon does not have any thermal power in itself. It's just a great big huge rock in the middle of space. But it reflects the sun. And in the same way, the nation of Israel not only shows God's presence, but also reflects his nature and his glory and his essence. And then, of course, we have the crown of 12 stars on her head, which is the 12 tribes of Israel. It says she was pregnant and she cried out in pain, for she was about to give birth. Now, something dramatic is about to happen. Of course, we do know that the nation of Israel was the one that brought forth Jesus Christ. So this is a picture of that which has happened in the past, but also that which is about to happen again. You see, Jesus Christ is coming back, and Jesus Christ is going to be shown as the Messiah of the nation of Israel. Now, it says here in verse number 3, another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. Now, this dragon will be, of course, interpreted or revealed as Satan himself. Now, there's a lot of speculation about the 7 heads and the 10 horns and the 7 crowns. Most likely, it is going to be, there'll be 7 authorities within this unholy union. Because remember, this is also the time period of the Antichrist. And so maybe there'll be 7 leaders at that time. I know there's lots of speculation about what it is. But we also know that it will have 10, it says here, 10 horns. Now, that regularly is talking about, of course, the 10-nation confederacy that surrounds itself and becomes the support of the Antichrist. Some believe it's Europe. Some are now beginning to speculate it could be the Muslims. Folks, that's what this is all about. There's lots of speculation. And over the years, depending on who's in charge at the time, scholars, Bible prophecy people do that. We do know that it has 7 crowns on its head, so most likely there are 7 kings that have risen to prominence within this 10-nation confederacy. Many have believed it's the old Roman Empire, which would be Europe. And of course, many people are saying, well, now that there's, so many countries in Europe. But you see, there are only 7 or 8 really prominent nations within the European Union. So it's entirely possible that, and again, I'm only throwing some things out here to think about, and that is the fact that we do know the dragon is Satan. And we do know that there are 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on its head. We do know it's kind of an ugly looking thing anyway. And we do know that it's a 10-nation confederacy, at least that's what scholars says, and 7 of those will rise to prominence. Now, it does say this in verse number 4, its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. And the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so it might devour her child the moment he was born. We do know that this is a picture of a war in heaven. And in fact, in verse number 7, in just a couple minutes, we're going to look at that. And so what this dragon does is brings a third of the angels with him. And they have a war in heaven, which we will talk about in just a couple minutes. And it stood in front of the child to devour her child as soon as it was born. But it was interesting. It's very interesting. Verse number 5. It says, she gave birth to a son, a male child, who would rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child, let me look here, was snatched up to God and his throne. So, we do know who this child is. We know it's Jesus Christ. And we know that he's a male child. And he will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And of course, that's an Old Testament prophecy, both from Isaiah and from the Psalms. And it says, her child, however, was able to escape. Here you have this dragon ready to devour the male child. And instead, it snatched up to heaven and to his throne. And it says the woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. So in the last chapter, we have the first 3.5 years of 1,260 days and the two prophets and their responsibility. Obviously, after these two prophets are able to rise up and we have that great earthquake, then, of course, we have the next scene, which is, of course, the woman, Israel, and Satan comes after Israel, and that would be normal. This looks like we're heading into the second half of the tribulation period. And the male child was snatched away to God in his heaven. And so, because he couldn't go after the child, he goes after the woman. But interesting fact is that this woman has a place prepared for her in the wilderness. Many scholars believe that the nation of Israel will flee into the hills of Judea and be protected by God there for the next 1,260 days. We do know this, that the nation of Israel, this woman, will flee to a place prepared to her by God. God has everything under control. Even though Satan has all kinds of designs, the dragon has all kinds of designs, God has his plan. And let me just say this to you today. Satan may have all kinds of designs on your life, but he cannot do anything without God's permission. And secondly, God will also keep you. I love 1 Corinthians 10:13. It says, God will not allow us to be tempted beyond what we're able to endure, but with the temptation, a means of escape. Now look at verse number 7. It says, then a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. And the great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the world astray. He was hurled down to the earth with his angels with him. So we know that this is an event that has already taken place, but it's also an event that will take place because right now the Bible says he's known as the accuser of the brethren. That means that as the accuser of the brethren, he is going to try to do everything he can to bring you down. So they've already lost, but their access to heaven will in this time period be completely and totally cut off. They've lost the battle, and he'll be hurled down to the earth, and he's the one who leads the whole world astray, his angels with him. So we have this war in heaven where 2/3 of the angels stay with the Lord and 1/3 of the angels go with Satan. And what happens to them is quite simple. They lose their glory and their nature is changed. And I would even venture to say their appearance has changed as well. And they have only one agenda, and that is to undo everything that God is doing in his world and situation. They're going to try and do everything to destroy your relationship. Jesus said in John 10:10, the thief comes to rob, kill, and destroy. So the MO of every demon of hell, which is of course at one time was an angel, their whole agenda is to rob you, kill you, and destroy you if possible. But we can also take comfort in the fact that, like the nation of Israel, the Lord has prepared a place for you, a place of protection, a place of help. And that is such a wonderful promise for you today. Satan lost the battle. God gave us the victory. Remember, 1 John 3:8 says, Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil, and he can destroy them in your life and situation. Stay in that place that is prepared for you. Stay in the center of God's will. My name is Robert Dean Steele. You have yourself a great and godly day. This is your daily Bible class.